A few days after October 7th, I was connecting with another parent who was looking to me for advice. He said, I really don't want to tell my kids that people hate us. And I was stumped because I felt much the same way. I've never wanted to think that other people in general hate us, the Jewish people in general. And I've certainly never wanted to tell my kids that. And yet this parent was saying, I feel like I need to communicate something real to them about what I feel is happening. And I don't want to do it in a way that's going to permanently make them feel a victim. And we spoke for a long time. And finally, I got to a place within myself that felt very true and very important. I said to him, if you tell them that, if you say that other people hate us, you also have to tell them and show them all of the things you love about being a Jew. That's the only way. Wow. And that's the only way that this will work. In this week's Parsha, we seem to be confronted with this message, again, that they hate us. We hear about a king of Moab, Balak, who looks upon a sea of Israelites and says, these people are so numerous that they cover the earth. It's very evocative imagery. And he's terrified of them. And with his fear, he says, I want to curse them. I want to find a prophet powerful enough that they'll curse the Jewish people so that they won't be a threat to me and to my sovereignty in the land. He says in his description of the people, he describes them only as these people who God brought Mitzrayim, out of Mitzrayim, and who now cover the earth. Later, we hear the same people described by the prophet who he brings to curse the people, Bilam. And as we read this morning, and I shared with you, Bilam is very reticent or confused about what to do about this commandment to curse, because meanwhile, he seems to have a direct line to Hashem, specifically to the Jewish God, who says, you're never going to curse these people. They are blessed to me. And so the only thing that's going to come out of your mouth when you go to speak is going to be what I allow. The first of 3 rounds of attempted cursing that Bilam does, this is what comes out of his mouth. How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? From the top of the rocks I see them, and from the hills I gaze down. A people that dwells alone. Am levadad yishkon, not reckoned among the nations. When we hear this verse, a people that dwells alone, I want to sit here for a moment, because this is a very evocative line. You could read it as a repetition of this thing I've said we feel and we've felt for generations, something that we may even find ourselves repeating to our children. We feel alone. We fear that we are alone. And we have to ask, because this is coming out of the mouth of Bilam, and in a moment when he's been asked to curse the people but seems to be blessing them, is this in fact a blessing or a curse? Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs spoke about this. Well, what's amazing about him is that whoever's running his media now posthumously picks the most amazing stuff out of his Torah. It's like very prophetic. So this week, the Torah of his that was lifted back up raised this exact question. Do we, the Jewish people, in fact, dwell alone? And what I loved about Rabbi Sachs's Torah on this is we say this, but if we believe it over much, we will make it a reality. On the one hand, we have to allow in the realities of the Jewish past. And on the other hand, we don't want to take Bilam's ambiguity and make it a fact. In the Talmud, in the book of Sanhedrin, it says that all of the blessings which Bilam blessed the Jewish people with turned into curses, with the sole exception of the phrase, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. That's the only line he says that stays a blessing. So how are we to understand Am Livadad Yishchon, a people who dwells alone? Is it a blessing or is it a curse? I want to turn to a different thinker for a moment, Yehuda Kurtzer of the Shalom Hartman Institute, who gave a talk recently that he called Our Golden Age, where he spoke in great depth about the American Jewish community. It's a great talk, and I recommend it to anyone, but what I want to lift from it are a few threads of what he says. He opens by talking about what he calls Judeo-optimism and Judeo-pessimism. Judeo-optimism being the belief that the conditions of a liberal democracy could actually make Jewish thriving in liberal society possible. And that if we're not experiencing that, it's just because we haven't yet achieved those conditions. Judeo-pessimism, he says, is that liberalism is essentially a lie, that the only option for Jewish thriving is to have the responsibility for ourselves in our own hands. Those two worldviews, he says, and we can, I think, observe, play out simultaneously. It's not one or the other. It's not one triumphing over the other. And often internally, as individuals, we might hold them both simultaneously and feel them in tension in us. And certainly in our Jewish society, we feel those things in a dynamic tension, often with one another. What's remarkable about this moment for American Jewry is that our community has largely been defined by Judeo-optimism for a very long time, a real profound belief in the project of what it is to be American, and that as we see headlines such as Franklin Foer's article in The Atlantic that proclaimed the end of the Golden Age, he says, Yehuda Kurtzer says, that we're watching ourselves embrace, as former Judeo-optimists, a view of Judeo-pessimism. We're declaring this project that we've believed in and shaped ourselves in for so long, we feel to be dead. He also notes that in the past, in the Jewish past, America has held special prominence, that for Rabbi Schneerson and Feinstein, two very important, one Chabad, one modern Orthodox, poskim and teachers of the Jewish people, that they actually referred to the United States as a malchut shel chesed, a kingdom of kindness, that this was the early Jewish American experience and vision of what America was. And think for a moment about how different this is than every other story the Jewish people have told of every other nation they've ever been minorities in. Not only that, but I think I want to return you to the movie version of Fiddler on the Roof, where it's very evocative that the prayer for the country that the people say is, God bless the Tsar and keep him far away from us. And this morning, mere moments ago, we heard the prayer for our country read, and in it is pure optimism, belief in something, faith even, that the project of what it means to be America is alive and well, and we are contributing empowered members of this populace. All of this, Yehuda Kurtzer comes to say, is perhaps most importantly viewed through the lens of the broader culture that we reside in. And in fact, our values, these Jewish American values that we've created as a Jewish American people, historically lined up very well with the ethos of America. And that perhaps what we're most profoundly experiencing is a change in American values. And we suddenly see our values, which were once part of the culture, becoming countercultural. Back to this idea of us being Am levadad yishkon, a people that dwells alone, Rabbi Sachs asks, is being alone a good thing or a bad thing? Being alone happens and is talked about multiple times in the Torah, and it's actually talked about as being not good. It appears in the very beginning of the Torah in the book of Bereshit when it says, Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado, it's not good for man to be alone. It comes up later in the book of Leviticus where a leper is described as Badad Yeshev michutz lemachaneh meshovo. He shall dwell alone outside the camp. And in the book of Echa, Lamentations, which we'll hear on Tisha B'Av, we say, Echa yashav vadad ha'ir rabati am. How alone is the city once filled with people. In all of that, being alone is not a blessing. In our words, though, the rabbis read many things, always true, of the Torah. And I want to point you to one commentator in particular who reads Am levadad yishkon in a way that I want us to truly consider this morning, especially in light of Yehuda Kurtzer's teachings about our community as American Jews. Ramban, Nachmanides, said on this verse, many peoples of various nations may at times gather together in a single camp, but these people all have a single Torah and a single law. They are one nation. They dwell apart under the name of Jacob and Israel. And this is why Balaam invoked both their own name and their ancestral name, both calling them the Yaakov and Yisrael. That's Ma Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael. They're called both Yaakov and Israel. Whereas when we saw Balak speak about them, he called them merely a people who came Mimitzrayim, a people who came out from Egypt. He left them unidentified, acting as if he didn't know them. And then the Torah goes even deeper and says, and we know that Balak did know them because actually Abraham had rescued Lot, who's the ancestor of the Moabites. So we have a whole midrashic story about why it's disingenuous for Balaam to call them just the people who came out of Mitzrayim. The Torah believes he actually knows them and maybe even is targeting them for special ire or hatred. And that being said, what is most profound and what I really want you to see is how Balaam invokes their internal self-understanding. He calls them and sees them not as he views them from the outside, but as they understand themselves to be from within. And this is what I want to return us to. Because if we are truly to live our full values, if we're truly to offer what we are uniquely to humankind, then we have to know who we are. And our story about who we are can never come fully from the outside, from what people will see us as, whether they like us or don't. That can never be how we define ourselves. So as we consider what it will mean to live our values, even if they become countercultural, the call to know who we are as Jewish people, to live our Torah, to live our commitments to our Judaism, and to really believe in what our Torah teaches us about how to be good, righteous, and to pursue goodness in the world. That is what we have to know for ourselves and teach to the next generation. And so I remind you that in the end, it is actually we who decide if our uniqueness is a curse or a blessing. And I can tell you that I feel great pride in reminding my children every day that I absolutely love and treasure being a Jew. Shabbat Shalom.